In this video, you will be introduced to Sati. Sati is often translated as mindfulness, awareness, or attention. For the rest of these videos, I will simply translate it as awareness. In my teaching method, I place Sati at great importance. Sati allows joy to emerge. Sati dispels laziness and allows energy and power to arise. Sati prevents fear and anxiety and doubt from arising, giving rise to unshakable confidence and fearlessness. Sati paves the road to Samadhi and therefore the jhanas. Sati examines the mind for wanting, hating, and illusion. Sati anchors the mind to prevent further arising of wanting, hating, and illusion. So what is Sati? Sati means to be aware. Suppose you are wondering what day it is. You stop doing whatever it is you're doing and you allow your mind to find the answer. That's Sati. Suppose you're walking and you're about to step on something. You stop walking and you allow your eyes to find the danger. That's Sati. Suppose you're not in a good mood. You stop and ask yourself what's wrong. You realize that something is bothering you. That realization, that's Sati. Suppose you're sick and your body aches. You stop and remember what the Buddha said about impermanence. Our bodies are impermanent. It's not always going to be healthy. They're changing from one moment to another, one day to another. When you realize that in context to your body, that's Sati. So Sati has roots in memory, to remember. So memorizing, remembering, and recalling are also key aspects of Sati. So let's see what the Buddha had to say about it. In this sutta, the Buddha is at his last year of life and is very sick. However, he describes how Sati is used so he is untroubled and can be comfortable. This is Samyutta Nikaya 47.9. After the Buddha had commenced the rainy season residence, he fell severely ill, struck by dreadful pains, close to death. But he endured unbothered with mindfulness and situational awareness. So, Ananda, live as your own island, your own refuge, with no other refuge. Let the teaching be your island and your refuge, with no other refuge. And how does a mendicant do this? It's when a mendicant meditates by observing an aspect of the body, keen, aware, mindful, rid of covetousness and displeasure for the world. They meditate observing an aspect of feelings, mind, and principles, keen, aware, and mindful, rid of covetousness and displeasure for the world. That's how a mendicant lives as their own island, their own refuge, with no other refuge. And that's how the teaching is their island, their refuge, and no other refuge. In this next sutta, the Buddha meets a Brahmin. The Brahmin asks the Buddha how he lives in a forest, which is typically very scary and distracting and not conducive to calmful meditation. This is Majjhima Nikaya number 4. Brahmin, it occurred to me, when contemplatives or Brahmins who have hazy mindfulness and lack of clear awareness go dwell in remote wilderness or forest areas because of that flaw, in other words, hazy mindfulness and lack of clear awareness, those honorable contemplatives and Brahmins bring upon themselves unwholesome fear and terror. But when I go dwell in the remote wilderness and forest, I do not have hazy mindfulness and lack of clear awareness. I have mindfulness established. Of the noble ones who have mindfulness established, when they go and dwell in the remote wilderness or forests, I am one of them. Brahmin, seeing that I have mindfulness established, I become more confident about living in the wilderness. Okay, so you may have noticed that in the Pali translation, the Buddha's usage of the compound term Sati, Sampajanya. Sati is often accompanied by Sampajanya, especially in the suttas or early Buddhist texts. I'm going to make a future video on Sampajanya, but for now consider it a very similar but somewhat distinct term to Sati. Now I'm going to make an interesting digression at this point. In early Buddhism, especially in the suttas, there is a fluid cohesion between different concepts, which in later texts like the Abhidhamma or Visuddhimagga or future texts after the Buddha died, which we call post-canonical texts, there were rigid distinguishes. Okay, now this is not going to be a very popular point or might be a controversial point, but I personally think that at the time of the Buddha, there were no hard distinctions between sati and samadhi, between vipassana and samatha, between saddha and panya. So that's not to say that these weren't different concepts, and that's not to say that there weren't good pedagogical reasons to keep them separate. But in my mind, the Buddha had a very cohesive, holistic form of Dhamma. And in my method of teaching, especially in this class, I frequently rely on this fluidity, this synonymity to guide my students. So rather than distinguishing, this is vipassana, this is samatha, this is samadhi, this is sati, I find that there's a gradient that naturally flows from one concept to another. Okay? So for example, in this talk, we talk about sati, but to me, sati and samadhi are just two ends of a spectrum. Thank you.